December 6, 1917. Halifax, Nova Scotia is not just a city, it is a bottleneck. The Great War is raging in Europe, and this deep, ice-free harbor is the final launching pad for the Allied war machine. It is a city choked with coal smoke, steam whistles, and the desperate, frantic energy of survival. Every single day, millions of tons of steel, flesh, and high explosives are funneled through a narrow strait of water less than half a mile wide. They call it, simply, the Narrows. It is a geographical choke point where the margin for error is measured in yards, and the consequence of failure is unthinkable. On this freezing Thursday morning, two ships are about to test that margin. Steaming slowly toward the Narrows is the SS Mont-Blanc. She is a French cargo tramp, aging, sluggish, and unremarkable to look at. To the thousands of civilians waking up in the wooden houses lining the harbor, she is just another rusting hull heading out to sea. But the Mont-Blanc is a deception. She is not a ship. She is a 3-kiloton bomb. Deep in her rusted belly, packed tight against her steel ribs, are 2,300 tons of wet and dry picric acid, an explosive so volatile it dwarfs standard TNT. Beneath that, 200 tons of TNT itself. Wedged into the remaining space are 10 tons of gun cotton. But the most terrifying cargo is not in the hold. It is strapped to the open deck, exposed to the freezing salt spray and the morning sun. Stacked 3 tiers high, lashed together with rope, are hundreds of steel drums filled with benzol, a highly flammable aviation fuel that turns into a heavy explosive vapor the second it touches the air. Under normal maritime law, a ship carrying this much concentrated death is required to fly a bright red flag, a universal warning to stay away. But this is wartime. German U-boats are hunting off the coast, and a red flag is a painted target. So the Mont-Blanc flies nothing. She is a goose ship of high explosives, creeping through a city of 60,000 people who have no idea she is there. On the bridge, Captain Imo is nervous. He is a seasoned mariner, but he knows what he is standing on. He has demanded a local harbor pilot to guide him through the Narrows. Pilot Francis Mackey, a man who knows every treacherous current of Halifax Harbour, is standing beside him. Mackey keeps his eyes locked dead ahead. He knows the rules of the Narrows are simple. Stay to the right, keep your speed down, do not pass. But as they round the final bend into the strait, Mackey sees something that makes his blood turn to ice water. Coming straight at them, completely in the wrong lane, is a mountain of steel. This is the SS Imo. She is a massive Norwegian relief vessel, 430 feet of heavy iron. And she is empty. Because she has no cargo, she is riding dangerously high in the water, her massive propeller churning the surface, making her incredibly difficult to steer. Her captain, Håkon Fram, is furious. He has been trapped in the harbor for 2 days due to a coal shortage. He's behind schedule, he's losing money, and he is determined to get out to the open ocean as fast as possible. To save time, Captain Fram has made a fatal, arrogant decision. He has ordered his ship into the wrong lane to bypass a slow-moving tugboat. He is steaming down the left side of the channel, exactly where the Mont-Blanc is supposed to be. The two ships are now less than 3/4 of a mile apart. They are on a direct, inescapable collision course. Pilot Mackey on the Mont-Blanc sounds a single deafening blast of his steam whistle. It is a universal maritime signal. I have the right of way. I am staying my course. Move. On the bridge of the Imo, Captain Håkon Fram hears the whistle. He looks at the sluggish French freighter in his path. He looks at the open water he desperately wants to reach. And then he pulls his own steam cord. 2 blasts. I am staying my course. You move. It is 8:40 a.m. The deadliest game of chicken in human history has just begun. On the bridge of the Mont-Blanc, pilot Francis Mackey feels the panic rising in his chest, hot and sharp against the freezing air. He has sounded his whistle, he has claimed the right of way, but the massive Norwegian ship steaming toward him is not yielding an inch. Mackey turns to Captain Lemedic. The French captain is rigid, his knuckles white on the brass railing. They both know what is in their holds. They both know that the Mont-Blanc is a sluggish, overloaded vessel. She does not turn quickly. "She is holding the port side," Mackey says, his voice tight. "She expects us to move." Lemedic stares at the approaching mountain of steel. "If we hold, she cuts us in half." Mackey knows the harbor's geography intimately. To their right is the Dartmouth shore, shallow water and jagged shoals. If they turn starboard to avoid the Imo, the Mont-Blanc will run aground. Grounding a ship packed with 2,300 tons of volatile picric acid is a guaranteed death sentence. The impact alone could trigger the cargo. They have only one terrible option. "Hard to port," Mackey orders, his voice cracking. "Steer for the center channel. We cross her bow." It is a desperate, counterintuitive maneuver. The Mont-Blanc groans, her rudder fighting the current. Slowly, agonizingly, the heavily laden ship begins to swing left, aiming for the middle of the narrow strait, hoping the Imo will finally pass on their right. But on the bridge of the Imo, Captain Fromm makes a fatal miscalculation. Seeing the Mont-Blanc finally turn to port, Fromm believes the French ship is yielding the entire left lane. He assumes he has won the standoff, but he is carrying too much speed. "Engines full astern," Fromm barks. It is the final catastrophic error. The Imo is empty. Her massive bronze propeller sits high in the water. When her engines are thrown violently into reverse, the physics of a right-handed propeller in shallow water act like a massive pivot. Instead of slowing down in a straight line, the Imo's bow suddenly, sharply swings violently to the right, directly into the path of the Mont-Blanc. The men on both ships can now clearly see each other's faces. They are close enough to throw a stone across the freezing water. The silence in the harbor is only broken by the deafening, frantic churning of the Imo's reversed engines. "Stop your engines!" Mackey screams from the bridge of the Mont-Blanc, waving his arms in sheer terror. "Stop!" It is 8:45 a.m. The physics of inertia take over. The collision is not a violent explosion. It is a slow, agonizing metallic scream. Moving at barely 1 mile per hour, the sharp steel prow of the Imo slices directly into the starboard bow of the Mont-Blanc. The impact is absolute. Steel plates shriek and tear like paper. Iron rivets shear off and fire across the deck like shrapnel. The Imo carves a 10-foot gash into the #1 hold of the French ship, crushing deep into the cargo. On the deck of the Mont-Blanc, the force of the impact snaps the frozen ropes holding the barrels of aviation fuel. Dozens of steel drums tumble and burst open, spilling highly refined benzol across the shredded steel deck. The fuel pours down into the gaping wound, cascading directly onto the shattered wooden crates of dry picric acid. The entire forward section of the ship is instantly saturated in an explosive, vaporizing chemical fog. Captain Lemedic is thrown against the bulkhead. He recovers instantly, his eyes wide with horror. The Imo is wedged deep inside them, plugging the hole she just created. But Captain Fromm, panicking on the Imo, makes one last attempt to save his ship. Without waiting for a damage assessment, he orders his engines to continue in full reverse. He's trying to pull out. "No!" Mackey screams, realizing what is about to happen. "Leave her in! Leave the bow in!" The Imo tears backward. As the two massive ships grind apart, the friction of torn steel scraping against torn steel generates a shower of brilliant white-hot sparks. The sparks fall directly into the vaporized cloud of benzol. A flash of intense blue-white fire ignites at the waterline. Within seconds, it races up the side of the hull, finding the spilled fuel on the deck. A column of thick, oily black smoke instantly shoots into the freezing morning air. The Mont-Blanc is on fire. Captain Lemedic looks down at the flames licking at the steel deck. Beneath that deck, sitting in the dark, are 3 million pounds of high explosives. The fire is inches away from the picric acid. He looks at Mackey. The pilot's face is completely drained of color. The rules of the sea dictate that a captain stays with his ship to the very end. But there is no ship to save, only a bomb waiting to detonate. "Abandoned ship," Lemedic says, his voice a dead, flat whisper. "Lower the boats. We are dead men." The Mont-Blanc is no longer a ship. She is a burning fuse. A thick, oily column of jet-black smoke begins to rise from her forward deck, curling high above the freezing waters of the Narrows. Deep within her hull, the spilled benzol has ignited the wooden crates holding the dry picric acid. The temperature inside the holds is rising exponentially by the second. On the bridge, Captain Imo does not hesitate. There is no damage control for a cargo of high explosives already engulfed in flames. "Abandon ship," he screams, his voice tearing against the roaring fire below him. "To the lifeboats, now!" The crew of the Mont-Blanc moves with the frantic, terrified energy of men who know exactly what they are standing on. They scramble toward the lifeboats, fighting through the thick smoke and the intense heat radiating from the forward deck. They do not try to put out the fire. They do not grab their belongings. They cut the ropes holding the wooden lifeboats, drop them into the freezing harbor, and hurl themselves over the side. Within minutes, the entire French crew is in the water, rowing furiously toward the Dartmouth shore. They are abandoning their ship, leaving her engines dead and her steering completely unmanned. But they are doing something else as well. As they pull their oars through the icy water, the French sailors are screaming, "Fire! Munitions! Stay away! Munitions!" They wave their arms frantically at the other ships in the harbor, at the tugboats rushing toward the smoke, at the dock workers gathering on the Halifax piers. They are desperately trying to warn the city of the 3-kiloton bomb drifting toward them. But it is a fatal failure of communication. The roar of the fire on the Mont-Blanc is deafening. The shrieking of steam whistles from a dozen other ships drowns out their voices. And even if they could be heard, the terrified crew is screaming in French. The people of Halifax do not understand them. On the Halifax side of the harbor, a very different scene is unfolding. It is a spectacle. The city is awake. Children are walking to the Richmond district schools. Men are arriving for their shifts at the Acadia Sugar Refinery, the massive stone building sitting directly on the water's edge. Women are in their kitchens, preparing breakfast, looking out their windows at the harbor. What they see is not a disaster. It is a magnificent fireworks display. The fire on the Mont-Blanc is spectacular. The benzol drums on the deck are superheating and exploding, shooting hundreds of feet into the air like massive Roman candles, trailing brilliant tails of fire and black smoke. Because the Mont-Blanc flew no red warning flag, no one on shore knows she is carrying munitions. They think she is just a regular cargo ship, perhaps carrying coal or oil, providing a thrilling morning show. People begin to gather. Hundreds of dock workers walk out onto the wooden piers, leaning against the railings to watch the burning ship drift closer. Families step out onto their porches. Inside the homes lining the hills of Halifax, thousands of people press their faces directly against their glass windows to get a better view. It is a fatal curiosity. The Mont-Blanc, abandoned and completely at the mercy of the harbor currents, is no longer in the center of the channel. She is drifting, slowly, inevitably, toward Pier 6 on the Halifax side. In the nearby railway yard, a telegraph dispatcher named Vincent Coleman is watching the burning ship from his office window. He's a veteran railwayman, responsible for controlling the massive trains that move through the bottleneck of the city. He sees the Mont-Blanc drifting toward the pier. He sees the thick, unnatural color of the smoke. And then, a terrified sailor from another ship bursts through his door. "She's a munition ship! She's loaded with explosives! Get out!" Coleman freezes. He knows the train schedule by heart. He knows that the overnight express from St. John, carrying nearly 200 passengers, is due to arrive at the Richmond station in less than 5 minutes. The tracks run directly parallel to Pier 6. The train will pass within a few hundred yards of the burning ship. Coleman looks at the door. He could run. He has time to make it up the hill, to save himself. But he doesn't. Vincent Coleman turns back to his telegraph key. He sits down at his desk, his fingers trembling, and begins to tap out a frantic, desperate message down the line, trying to stop the approaching train. "Hold up the train. Ammunition ship afire in harbor, making for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys." He taps it out again and again. It is 9 a.m. The Mont-Blanc gently bumps against Pier 6. The wooden pilings instantly catch fire. The temperature inside the cargo holds hits 5,000 degrees Celsius. The picric acid begins to boil. The countdown is over. It is 9:04 a.m. The SS Mont-Blanc is pressed hard against the wooden pilings of Pier 6, burning with a fury that is rapidly consuming the air around it. Deep inside her rusted hull, the temperature of the 2,300 tons of picric acid reaches a critical mass. The chemical structure of the explosive is breaking down, expanding at an unnatural, catastrophic rate. It is a violet chain reaction, trapped inside millions of pounds of steel. The pressure is absolute. It has nowhere to go. At exactly 9:04 and 35 seconds, the Mont Blanc ceases to exist. The detonation is not merely a sound, it is a fundamental tearing of reality. The ship vaporizes in a fraction of a millisecond. The instantaneous expansion of gases creates a shock wave that travels outward at 23 times the speed of sound. At the epicenter, the temperature flashes to 5,000 degrees Celsius, hotter than the surface of the sun. The water of the harbor, millions of gallons of it, is instantly converted into superheated steam. The seabed of Halifax Harbour, 60 feet below the ship, is violently exposed to the air for the first time in millennia. The blast gouges a crater directly into the solid bedrock. Above the crater, a blinding, terrible flash of white light illuminates the city. It is followed by a deafening roar so profound it is heard over 200 miles away. The shockwave is a physical, solid wall of compressed air, moving at over 3,300 miles per hour. It slams into the Richmond district of Halifax with the force of 3 kilotons of TNT. The destruction is instantaneous and absolute. In a radius of 1 square mile, every single structure is obliterated. There is no fire first, there is only the pulverizing force of the blast. The massive 5-story stone walls of the Acadia sugar refinery, standing just feet from the pier, are blown inward like they are made of dry leaves. Inside, hundreds of men are instantly crushed to death before the sound of the explosion even reaches them. The Richmond district, a working-class neighborhood of wooden homes rising up the hill from the harbor, is flattened as if swatted by a colossal hand. Houses are not just knocked over, they're atomized into millions of lethal splinters traveling at supersonic speeds. Trees are snapped at their bases, telegraph poles are ripped from the ground and thrown like javelins. The massive steel yards of the railway are twisted into unrecognizable knots of iron. But the most terrifying consequence of the explosion is what happens to the thousands of people who are standing at their windows watching the spectacle. It becomes known as the window phenomenon. Because the Mont Blanc flew no red warning flag, thousands of civilians had pressed their faces against the glass panes of their homes, captivated by the burning ship. When the shockwave hits, the glass shatters inward. Thousands of people are instantly, simultaneously blinded by the driving force of the shrapnel. It is a gruesome, heartbreaking tragedy that will leave a permanent scar on the city for generations. The violence is not confined to the land. The explosion violently displaces the water in the harbor, creating a massive, localized tsunami. A 60-foot wall of black, freezing water surges outward from the epicenter. It slams into the Dartmouth shore on the opposite side of the Narrows, wiping out the Mi'kmaq community of Tufts Cove. The water completely submerges the settlement, drowning those who survived the initial blast. The tsunami then races back across the harbor toward Halifax, sweeping the debris of thousands of homes, the bodies of victims, and entire railway cars out into the deep water. And high above the city, the remains of the Mont Blanc are falling from the sky. The 3-million-pound freighter was shattered into jagged, burning shrapnel. A massive piece of her half-ton anchor shank is blown nearly 2.5 miles inland, burying itself deep in the earth. The barrel of one of her deck guns flies over 3 miles, landing miles away in Alborough Lake. A monstrous, churning cloud of black smoke, vaporized water, and pulverized debris rises 2 miles into the air, spreading rapidly over the ruined city like a shroud. The explosion is over in a matter of seconds, but for the people of Halifax, the nightmare has just begun. Beneath the blackened sky, the shattered remains of the wooden houses ignite. The overturned coal stoves and hundreds of kitchens have been thrown into the splintered wood. Across the devastated Richmond district, a massive firestorm begins to burn. And as the thousands of injured, blinded, and terrified survivors begin to crawl from the wreckage, the sky begins to darken. The temperature drops rapidly. The wind shifts, bringing a brutal, freezing cold. The worst blizzard in a decade is rolling toward Halifax. The city is broken, it is burning, and it is about to freeze. To understand the scale of the Halifax explosion, you cannot simply look at the crater in the harbor. You have to look at the microseconds of annihilation as the shockwave moved through the city block by block, house by house. The blast wave is moving at 23 times the speed of sound. It is a solid wall of compressed, superheated air. At the Acadia Sugar Refinery, situated less than 200 yards from Pier 6, 76 men are working the morning shift. They are surrounded by massive stone walls and heavy iron machinery. They are the closest living human beings to the Mont Blanc. When the shockwave hits the refinery, it does not shatter the building. It vaporizes the mortar holding the massive stones together. The 6-story structure collapses inward in less than a second. The men inside are crushed instantly under thousands of tons of masonry and iron. There's no time to scream. There's no time to react. The sound of the explosion has not even reached their ears before they are dead. Only a handful of men near the rear exits survive, buried under a mountain of rubble, plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. A quarter of a mile up the hill, the Richmond district is a densely packed neighborhood of wooden, working-class homes. This is where the true horror of the window phenomenon unfolds. Because the Mont Blanc was burning so spectacularly, thousands of people, mothers, children, elderly residents, had pressed their faces against the glass panes of their front windows, fascinated by the towering column of smoke and fire in the harbor. When the blast wave slams into the hill, it hits the glass first. The windows of thousands of homes shatter inward simultaneously. The glass is not simply broken, it is accelerated to supersonic speeds, transforming into millions of invisible razor-sharp projectiles. In a fraction of a second, over 1,000 people are permanently blinded. The sheer volume of eye injuries is so staggering that it will alter the course of medical history in North America, but in this moment, it is simply chaos. People are thrown backward into their living rooms, clutching their faces, completely sightless as their homes disintegrate around them. The blast wave continues its horrific march. It rips through the wooden frames of the Richmond houses, tearing them from their foundations. The structures are shredded into millions of wooden splinters that fly through the air like shrapnel, impaling anyone in their path. In the local schools, morning classes have just begun. The shockwave flattens the wooden schoolhouses, burying hundreds of children under heavy desks and shattered timber. The screams of the trapped echo through the dust-choked air, only to be drowned out by the thunderous roar of the explosion finally catching up to the destruction. And then comes the water. The explosion has gouged a massive crater into the seabed, displacing millions of gallons of harbor water. The water violently rushes back in to fill the void, creating a localized 60-foot-high tsunami. The black, freezing wave surges outward, slamming into the Dartmouth shore. It hits the Mi'kmaq community of Tufts Cove, a settlement that has stood for generations. The wave obliterates the village, sweeping away homes, boats, and entire families in an instant. Those who survived the initial blast wave are suddenly engulfed in freezing, debris-filled water, fighting for their lives against an unnatural tide. Back on the Halifax side, the tsunami surges up the ruined streets of the Richmond district, dragging the wreckage of the sugar refinery, pulverized homes, and hundreds of bodies back out into the deep harbor. It hits the railway yard with the force of a freight train. Massive iron-wheeled train cars weighing tens of thousands of pounds are lifted off their tracks and tossed like toys. In the railway dispatcher's office, Vincent Coleman, the man who stayed at his telegraph to warn the incoming train, is dead. The building has collapsed on top of him. But his final desperate message is still singing down the wire. As the shockwave finally dissipates, rolling over the hills and shattering windows 50 miles away, a terrifying silence descends upon Halifax. It is a silence born of absolute shock. The sky is blotted out by a towering, churning mushroom cloud of black smoke, vaporized water, and millions of pulverized debris rising 2 miles into the atmosphere. It begins to rain, but it is not water. A greasy, black rain, a mixture of unburned carbon from the benzol, atomized oil, and the soot of a destroyed city, begins to fall on the survivors. It coats the ruins, the dead, and the living in a thick, sticky layer of black slime. Slowly, agonizingly, the silence is broken. It starts as a low moan, rising from the rubble of thousands of flattened homes. Then the screams begin. The cries of the blinded, the trapped, and the dying fill the freezing air. It is 9:10 a.m. The city of Halifax has effectively been erased from the map. But the true nightmare, the fight for survival in a ruined, burning city, is only just beginning. The initial, pulverizing force of the blast is past. The shockwave has rolled out over the Atlantic and deep into the Nova Scotian forests, leaving behind a silence so profound it feels like deafness. But the silence does not last. It is broken by a sound that will haunt the survivors of Halifax for the rest of their lives: the crackle of dry wood catching fire. The Richmond district is no longer a neighborhood. It is a sprawling, jagged landscape of shattered timber, pulverized brick, and twisted iron. Thousands of homes have been completely flattened, stacked upon one another like a colossal pile of kindling. And buried deep within that kindling are thousands of people. Men, women, and children are trapped under the weight of their own collapsed roofs, pinned beneath heavy floor joists or entangled in the wire frames of their destroyed beds. Many of them are conscious. Many of them are completely blinded by the window phenomenon. They cannot see the sky, they cannot see the wreckage, but they can smell the smoke. December in Halifax is brutally cold. Every single home in the Richmond district had a cast iron coal stove burning white hot in the kitchen or the parlor to keep the morning freeze at bay. When the shock wave hit, it did not just flatten the houses, it violently overturned those heavy iron stoves. Thousands of red-hot coals, burning at hundreds of degrees, were spilled directly into the splintered, bone-dry wood of the collapsed homes. The blast wave itself provided the oxygen, fanning the scattered coals into immediate localized fires across a 1 square mile radius. Within minutes of the explosion, hundreds of individual fires begin to merge. The prevailing winds coming off the harbor, the same winds that drove the Mont-Blanc into the pier, now act as a bellows. The fires connect, leaping from one ruined house to the next, feeding on the pulverized wood, the shattered furniture, and the leaking gas lines ripped open by the blast. A massive, unnatural firestorm begins to form over the Richmond district. It is a terrifying wall of flame, generating its own weather system, sucking the oxygen out of the surrounding streets and creating hurricane-force winds that pull the fire higher into the sky. For the thousands of people trapped in the rubble, the realization is absolute horror. They are pinned. They cannot move their legs or free their arms. They can hear the roar of the firestorm approaching, a sound like a dozen freight trains bearing down on them. The heat begins to radiate through the shattered floorboards above them, turning the freezing winter air into an oven. In the ruins of the Richmond printing press, dozens of workers are trapped beneath the heavy iron machinery. They can hear the fire crackling through the paper stock. In the collapsed remains of the Protestant orphanage, where nearly all the children were crushed by the falling masonry, the few survivors are buried in the dark, screaming for help as the smoke begins to fill the voids in the rubble. Those who were not trapped, the walking wounded, the bleeding, the blinded, stumble through the chaotic streets. They are covered from head to toe in the thick, greasy, black rain that continues to fall from the towering mushroom cloud above the harbor. The black rain is a horrifying mixture of unburned carbon from the vaporized benzol, atomized oil, and the soot of a destroyed city. It coats the survivors in a sticky, tar-like substance, turning them into unrecognizable spectral figures wandering through hell. Fathers dig frantically into the burning wreckage of their homes with their bare, bleeding hands, trying to reach the screams of their children before the fire does. Women, their faces lacerated by flying glass, wander blindly toward the harbor, desperate for the freezing water to soothe their burns, only to find the harbor itself is a churning mass of wreckage and oil fires. The city's infrastructure is completely annihilated. There is no water pressure to fight the fires. The massive water mains beneath the streets were shattered by the seismic shock of the blast. There are no fire engines. The Halifax Fire Department's West Street station, the closest to the blast, was obliterated. The massive horse-drawn steam pumpers were thrown through the air and crushed. Chief Edward Condon and Deputy Chief William Brunt, who had rushed toward the burning Mont-Blanc just minutes before, were vaporized instantly. Halifax is burning to the ground, and there is absolutely nothing left to stop it. But the horror of the firestorm is about to be eclipsed by something else. As the survivors drag themselves out of the burning Richmond district, moving south toward the city center, a new, terrifying rumor begins to spread through the chaotic, bleeding crowds. It is a rumor born of wartime paranoia and sheer panic, and it is about to trigger a mass exodus that will leave thousands of trapped victims to burn alive. Halifax is not merely burning, it is bleeding out. The shockwave has shattered every pane of glass in a 3-mile radius. The streets are carpeted in an agonizing layer of jagged shards, mixed with the pulverized brick of 1,000 homes. Through this freezing, jagged landscape, a horrifying exodus is beginning. Tens of thousands of people are moving. They are stumbling away from the towering pillar of black, oily smoke rising from the Narrows. Many are missing limbs. Thousands are clutching their faces, blood pouring through their fingers from eyes destroyed by the window phenomenon. They are dragging themselves over the corpses of their neighbors, pulling children through the burning wreckage of the Richmond district. But their slow, agonizing march is about to turn into a stampede of pure, unadulterated terror. A mile from the epicenter stands the Wellington Barracks, a massive military installation housing hundreds of Canadian soldiers. When the blast hit, the stone buildings shuddered but held. The soldiers inside, hardened men waiting to be shipped to the trenches of Europe, were thrown to the floor. Within minutes they are on their feet, pouring into the parade square, staring in stunned silence at the apocalyptic mushroom cloud over the harbor. And then, a rumor begins to spread. It starts as a whisper among the ranks, born of wartime paranoia and the sheer, incomprehensible scale of the destruction they had just witnessed. It was a German attack. It is a logical assumption. Halifax is the most heavily fortified port in North America, the vital artery of the Allied war effort. For 3 years, the city has lived under the constant, suffocating fear of a German Zeppelin raid or U-boat attack. "The Germans are shelling us from the harbor," a young corporal screams, his face smeared with soot, his rifle clutched tightly to his chest. "No, it was a Zeppelin," another soldier yells back, pointing to the unnaturally black cloud above them. "They hit the munitions depot." But the rumor that truly breaks the city's sanity comes from the naval yards. Deep beneath the harbor, beneath the shattered docks and the churning water, lies the Wellington magazine. It is the military's primary munitions storage facility. It holds thousands of tons of high explosives, artillery shells, and cordite, far more than the Mont-Blanc ever carried. A terrified naval officer, his uniform torn and bloodied, comes sprinting up the hill from the dockyard. He crashes into a squad of soldiers, his eyes wide with absolute panic. "The magazine!" he screams, grabbing a sergeant by the lapels. "The fire is spreading to the magazine! It's going to blow!" The sergeant stares at him, the blood draining from his face. "When?" "Any minute! Get everyone out! Run! Run for the Citadel!" It is 9:30 a.m. The rumor of a second, infinitely larger explosion hits the bleeding crowds like a physical blow. The military police, acting on the unverified terror of a single officer, begin screaming the order through the ruined streets. "Evacuate! Get to the Citadel! The magazine is on fire! Run!" The panic is instantaneous and absolute. Imagine the horror. You have just survived the largest man-made explosion in history. Your home is gone. You are bleeding, freezing, and half blind. You are desperately trying to dig your trapped child out of the burning wreckage of your kitchen. And now, a soldier with a rifle is screaming that a second, larger bomb is about to detonate and you must abandon your child and run. In the ruins of the Richmond district, the choices made in these 10 minutes will haunt the survivors until the day they die. "Please," a woman screams, tearing at the splintered floorboards of her collapsed home. Beneath the wood, the muffled cries of her 6-year-old son can barely be heard over the roar of the approaching firestorm. "Help me lift this! He's right here!" A young soldier stops, grabbing the edge of the heavy timber. He strains against the weight, his boots slipping in the bloody, freezing mud. The wood doesn't budge. "Move! We have to move!" A military policeman roars, running past them, waving his arms toward the massive stone fortress of Citadel Hill in the center of the city. "The magazine is going up! Leave him!" The young soldier looks at the mother. He looks at the approaching wall of fire. He looks down at the splintered wood. "I'm sorry," he whispers, his voice cracking. He lets go of the timber and begins to run. The mother does not follow. She drops to her knees, screaming into the cracks of the wood, her bare hands bleeding as she tries to tear the house apart piece by agonizing piece, while the fire closes in. The exodus becomes a stampede. Thousands of terrified, bleeding civilians surge toward the citadel, the massive, star-shaped fortress sitting high above the city. They abandon the rescue efforts. They abandon the dying. They pour onto the sprawling, frozen grass of the Halifax Commons, an open space meant for military parades, now transformed into a horrific triage center. Over 10,000 people huddled together on the freezing ground, staring back at the towering pillar of black, oily smoke, waiting for the second explosion to end the world. They wait for 10 minutes. They wait for 20. It is 10 a.m. The rumor is false. The Wellington magazine is secure. The military realizes its catastrophic mistake. But the damage is done. For nearly an hour, the rescue efforts in the Richmond district were completely abandoned. By the time the soldiers and surviving firefighters realize there is no second bomb, it is too late. The localized fires have fully merged into an uncontrollable, roaring firestorm. The screams from beneath the rubble have gone entirely silent. And as the thousands of survivors huddled on the freezing commons finally begin to breathe, the sky above them turns the color of bruised iron. The wind shifts violently to the northeast. The temperature plummets below freezing. The worst blizzard in a decade has arrived. It is 12 p.m., high noon in Halifax, but the sun is gone. The towering mushroom cloud of vaporized steel and boiling water has spread across the entire city like a bruised, heavy iron lid. Beneath it, the firestorm in the Richmond district is raging unchecked. It has consumed over 1,600 homes. It has incinerated the Acadia Sugar Refinery, the Protestant Orphanage, and the Richmond Printing Press. And now, as the survivors huddle on the frozen expanse of the Citadel Hill, the sky opens up. It does not start as a gentle snowfall. It begins as a brutal, driving wall of ice and sleet, pushed by gale-force winds whipping off the North Atlantic. The temperature plummets 20 degrees in less than an hour. The water in the shattered harbor begins to turn to slush. For the thousands of people who have lost their homes, their winter coats, and their shoes in the blast, the cold is instantly lethal. This is not just a winter storm. It is the worst blizzard Nova Scotia has seen in a decade. In the ruins of the Richmond railway yards, the metal tracks are twisted like wet spaghetti. A massive freight car has been thrown 300 yards through the air, crushing a stone warehouse. Beneath the wreckage of that warehouse, a young mechanic named Thomas is trapped. He is pinned beneath a massive iron beam that has shattered his right leg. The beam is too heavy to move, and his hands are slick with his own blood. But the pain in his leg is nothing compared to the terror in his eyes. He is completely, permanently blinded by the window phenomenon. Thomas was standing at the warehouse window, watching the burning Mont-Blanc when the shockwave hit. The glass exploded inward, shredding his corneas instantly. He was thrown backward into the dark, and when the building collapsed, he awoke to a world of absolute, agonizing blackness. He can hear the roar of the firestorm a few streets over. He can smell the acrid smoke of burning benzol and scorched wood. And now he feels the freezing, biting wind whistling through the gaps in the rubble above him. He is lying on his back, his shattered leg pinned, the freezing mud seeping through his torn clothes. He reaches up blindly, his bloody fingers tracing the cold iron of the beam across his chest. "Help," he whispers, his voice barely a rasp. "Please." He screams, the sound tearing through the frozen air, but there is no answer. The rescue efforts have resumed, but they are agonizingly slow. The military has realized the rumor of a second explosion was false. Hundreds of soldiers, surviving police officers, and civilian volunteers are pouring back into the burning Richmond district, armed with nothing but pickaxes, shovels, and their bare hands. They are fighting a losing battle. The blizzard is dumping over a foot of snow onto the ruined city. For the rescuers, the snow is a curse. It covers the debris, hiding the jagged edges of shattered floorboards and exposed nails. It fills the craters, making every step treacherous. But most terrifyingly, the heavy snow acts as a perfect sound insulator. It muffles the cries of the trapped. A squad of soldiers, exhausted and freezing, are digging frantically through the remains of a two-story home near the railway yard. They are using pieces of shattered timber as crude levers, trying to lift a collapsed roof section. "Listen," the sergeant barks, holding up a bloodied hand. "Stop digging! Listen!" The men freeze, their breath pluming white in the freezing air. They strain to hear through the howling wind of the blizzard and the distant roar of the fires. From deep beneath the snow-covered wreckage, they hear a faint, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It is not a voice. It is the sound of a rock striking an iron pipe. "Over here!" the sergeant yells, diving onto the rubble, tearing at the snow with his bare hands. "Get this beam up! On 3!" The soldiers strain, their muscles screaming against the freezing cold, lifting the heavy timber just enough for the sergeant to shine a flashlight into the dark void below. Down in the dark, Thomas hears the scraping of wood above him. He feels a sudden agonizing shift in the iron beam crushing his leg. He cannot see the beam of the flashlight cutting through the dust, but he feels the sudden rush of freezing air hitting his face. "I'm here," he screams, his voice cracking. "My leg! The beam is on my leg!" "We see you, son. We're coming. Just hold on." It takes them 20 minutes of agonizing labor to shore up the collapsed roof and pry the iron beam off his shattered leg. When they finally drag Thomas out into the freezing blizzard, he is shivering violently, his face a mask of dried blood and soot. "My eyes," Thomas whispers as a soldier wraps a heavy wool blanket around him. "I can't see the snow." The soldier looks down on Thomas's ruined face, the blood mixing with the freezing sleet. He gently places a hand on the young mechanic's shoulder. "You're out, son. You're alive. We've got you." But for every Thomas pulled from the wreckage, there are dozens more who are not so lucky. As the blizzard intensifies, dumping 16 inches of snow on Halifax by nightfall, the rescue efforts become nearly impossible. The fires in the Richmond district continue to burn, casting an eerie, flickering orange glow against the driving snow. The snow covers the dead, turning the pulverized streets into a pristine, horrific landscape of white mounds. And beneath the snow, the silence deepens. The cries of the trapped, muffled by the heavy blanket of winter, slowly fade away as the freezing temperatures claim those the blast and the fire could not reach. It is 6 p.m. on December 6th. The first day of hell is over, but the true test of survival, the agonizing triage of thousands of critically injured civilians, is only beginning.
It is 8 p.m., December 6th.
The sun has long since set, but the city of Halifax is glowing. The Firestorm in the Richmond district continues to burn, casting a horrific, flickering orange light against the underside of the heavy snow clouds. The blizzard is relentless, dumping 16 inches of snow onto the shattered streets, burying the dead and the dying in an agonizing, freezing blanket. But the true horror of the night is not in the ruins. It is inside the walls of the few buildings left standing. The blast wave destroyed nearly every medical facility in the northern half of the city. The Halifax dispensary was obliterated. The Victoria General Hospital, miles from the epicenter, had its windows blown inward, showering the recovering patients in razor-sharp glass. Within an hour of the explosion, the city's remaining medical infrastructure completely collapsed under the sheer volume of the maimed, the blinded, and the dying. There are over 9,000 injured civilians. There are less than 100 doctors in the entire city. Camp Hill Hospital, a newly constructed military facility meant for soldiers returning from the trenches of Europe, was designed to hold 250 patients. By 9 p.m., there are over 1,500 bleeding, freezing civilians crammed inside its walls. The scene defies human comprehension. The hospital corridors are slick with blood and melted snow. There are no beds left. The wounded are laid out on the cold linoleum floors, packed so tightly together that the nurses and doctors cannot walk without stepping on them. The moans of the dying create a continuous, suffocating drone that echoes through the halls. The air is thick with the smell of raw flesh, ether, and the acrid smoke of the benzol fires clinging to the survivors' clothes. Dr. George Cox, the senior surgeon, has been operating continuously for 12 hours. He is standing in a makeshift surgical theater, a commandeered administrative office with a wooden desk serving as an operating table. He is exhausted, his white surgical gown soaked through with blood. He has amputated more limbs today than he did in a year on the Western Front. A young nurse, her face pale and her apron stained crimson, pushes through the chaotic crowd in the hallway. She is practically dragging a young girl, no older than 10, whose face is wrapped in bloody rags. "Dr. Cox," the nurse yells over the din. "Her eyes! The glass hit her eyes!" Dr. Cox turns, his hands trembling slightly as he drops a bloodied scalpel into a metal basin. He looks at the girl, who is shivering violently from the cold and the shock. "Put her on the desk," Cox orders, his voice raspy. "Hold her down. We have no more ether." The reality of the window phenomenon has hit the hospitals with devastating force. Hundreds of patients are arriving with catastrophic eye injuries caused by the supersonic glass shards. But the medical supplies are completely exhausted. The bandages ran out hours ago. The nurses are now tearing bed sheets and the clothes off the dead to wrap the wounds of the living. Most terrifyingly, they have run out of anesthetics. The young nurse grips the little girl's shoulders, pinning her to the wooden desk. Dr. Cox leans in with a pair of surgical tweezers and a small, rusted scalpel. "I am sorry, sweetheart. This is going to hurt." The girl screams as the doctor begins the agonizing process of pulling shards of shattered window glass directly from her ruined corneas without a single drop of painkiller. It is a scene repeated 100 times over in every corner of the hospital. In the hallways, medical students, pulled from their classrooms at Dalhousie University just hours before, are forced to make horrifying triage decisions. They walk among the thousands of bodies covering the floor, carrying a single bucket of iodine and a handful of torn sheets. They are looking for the ones who can be saved. They step over a man whose chest has been crushed by a falling beam. His breathing is shallow and wet. They do not stop. They cannot afford the time or the iodine. They move past a woman whose legs are missing below the knee, the wounds packed with dirty snow. She is already unconscious from the blood loss. They stop only for those who are bleeding out from survivable wounds. It is the cold, brutal mathematics of mass casualty survival. But outside the walls of the hospital, in the freezing, howling dark of the blizzard, a different kind of triage is happening. The military has commandeered the Chibukto Road School, a massive brick building that survived the blast wave. They are not using it as a hospital. They are using it as a morgue. By midnight, the basement of the school is filled with over 500 corpses. They are stacked like cordwood in the dark, freezing rooms. Soldiers, their faces numb with cold and horror, are continuously dragging sleds loaded with the dead through the blizzard, pulling them from the ruins of the Richmond district and dumping them at the school's doors. Many of the bodies are unrecognizable. They are burned beyond identification by the benzol fires or pulverized by the sheer force of the shockwave. A grim, silent procession of survivors begins to arrive at the school in the middle of the night. They are the mothers, the fathers, the husbands, and the wives who have spent the last 14 hours digging through the rubble of their homes. They are looking for their families. They are led down into the freezing basement by exhausted soldiers carrying kerosene lanterns. The flickering yellow light casts long, horrifying shadows across the stacked bodies. "Look at the shoes," a soldier whispers to a weeping woman, shining his lantern on a pile of charred remains. "If the face is gone, look at the feet. Sometimes that's all that's left." The woman falls to her knees in the freezing dark, sobbing uncontrollably as she searches the feet of the dead, looking for the tiny, scuffed leather boots of her 7-year-old son. It is 2 a.m. on December 7th. Halifax is buried under 2 feet of snow. Thousands are dead, thousands more are dying in the hallways of overflowing hospitals, and the city is plunged into an abyss of unimaginable grief. But even in the darkest hour, as the blizzard rages on, salvation is already moving up the eastern seaboard. The telegraph lines, repaired in the dead of winter, have finally carried the scream of Halifax to the outside world. It is dawn, December 7th. 24 hours have passed since the SS Imo tore into the hull of the SS Mont-Blanc. 24 hours since the largest man-made explosion in the history of the world erased the northern half of a city. The Firestorm in the Richmond district has finally burned itself out, starved of fuel and smothered by the relentless driving blizzard. The smoke has cleared enough for the survivors to truly see what is left of their world. It is a landscape of absolute freezing desolation. Over 1,600 acres of Halifax have been leveled to the bedrock. 2,000 people are dead. 9,000 are brutally injured. 25,000 people, nearly half the city's population, are completely homeless, wandering through 2 feet of snow with nothing but the torn clothes on their backs. The city is bleeding to death in the cold, but help is already screaming up the eastern seaboard. Before the telegraph lines were completely severed by the blast, Vincent Coleman's final desperate warning down the rail line, "Guess this'll be my last message, goodbye boys," did more than stop the incoming passenger train. It alerted the entire rail network that something catastrophic had happened in Halifax. Within hours of the explosion, before the blizzard had even begun, the cities of the North Atlantic coast mobilized with a speed and ferocity that defied belief. And no city moved faster than Boston. By 10 p.m. on the night of the explosion, while the doctors in Halifax were operating without ether in the dark, the governor of Massachusetts had already commandeered a massive relief train. They did not wait for an official request. They did not wait for a full damage assessment. Within 12 hours of the blast, a specialized train tore out of North Station in Boston, heading straight for the Canadian border. It was packed with the most valuable cargo on Earth: seasoned trauma surgeons, hundreds of nurses, millions of yards of bandages, and, crucially, massive stockpiles of ether and morphine. The journey is a nightmare of logistics. The blizzard that buried Halifax is hammering the entire coastline, burying the tracks in deep drifts of snow. But the Boston train does not stop. Men hang off the front of the locomotive with shovels, clearing the tracks by hand in the freezing gale. They push the steam engines to their absolute breaking point, tearing through the blinding whiteout, desperate to reach the dying city. When the first relief trains finally smash through the snowdrifts and pull into the ruined Halifax station, the doctors on board are met with a scene that eclipses anything they have seen in the war. The arrival of the Boston medical teams is the turning point of the disaster. They bring light into the dark, freezing hallways of Camp Hill Hospital. They bring anesthetics to the children whose eyes are filled with glass. They work relentlessly, shoulder to shoulder with the exhausted, blood-soaked Canadian doctors, amputating shattered limbs, stitching lacerated faces, and slowly, agonizingly pulling the city back from the edge of total collapse.
In the weeks and months that follow, the physical scars of Halifax slowly began to heal, but the psychological wounds will never close. The city demands answers, the public demands blood. An inquiry is launched, a bitter, vicious legal battle that seeks to pin the deaths of 2,000 civilians on the surviving men of the Mont-Blanc and the Imo. But Captain Imo of the Mont-Blanc and pilot Francis Mackey are arrested and charged with manslaughter. The city blames them for abandoning the burning ship, for not scuttling her in the deep water, and for navigating the Narrows with a floating bomb. But the courts eventually realized the truth of the maritime physics. The Mont-Blanc could not be scuttled fast enough. The explosion was inevitable the moment the Imo tore into the benzaldromes. The final judgment is a frustrating, hollow compromise. The courts ruled that both ships were equally at fault for the navigational errors that led to the collision. But for the thousands of blinded, maimed, and orphaned survivors, legal blame means nothing. It cannot rebuild the Richmond district. It cannot unshatter the glass. It cannot bring back the dead. Today, if you walk the streets of the rebuilt north end of Halifax, there are very few physical reminders of the apocalypse that occurred on December 6, 1917. The harbor is quiet. The massive ships still pass through the Narrows, adhering strictly to the traffic lanes. But the legacy of the blast lives on in the blood and the memory of the city. It lives on in the staggering advancements in pediatric surgery and ophthalmology, born from the horrors of the window phenomenon. It lives on in the creation of the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, founded to care for the hundreds of victims who lost their sight in a fraction of a second. And it lives on in a tradition that spans over a century. Every single year as winter approaches, the province of Nova Scotia cuts down the largest, most perfect evergreen tree they can find. They load it onto a truck and drive it hundreds of miles south, across the border, to the city of Boston. It is erected in the center of the Boston Common and lit with thousands of lights. It is not just a Christmas tree. It is a massive, towering monument of gratitude. A thank you note written in pine and electric light to the doctors, nurses, and railwaymen who smashed through a blizzard to save a burning, bleeding city in its darkest hour. The Mont-Blanc and the Imo were destroyed, but the Halifax explosion remains a terrifying testament to human arrogance, the brutal physics of momentum, and the devastating cost of a single, unavoidable mistake. It is a reminder that in the face of absolute, crushing annihilation, the only thing that can save us is each other.